So today we're going to be talking about human evolution. Okay, we know that humans evolved from the Miocene apes, which were around about 23 to 5 million years ago and gave rise to the present day ape lineages. Now, if you look at human evolution, it's not really a ladder, it's more like a tree because around 4 species of hominids could survive at any one given time period. However, they evolved and like branches of a tree, but in the end, only Homo sapiens survived, and the rest of the species died out. So the earliest hominins were actually found in Africa. A lot of the modern fossils have been found from the Great Rift Valley of Africa. And that's why some people call this the Garden of Eden, after the biblical Garden of Eden, except for the fact that Adam and Eve were actually of African origin. Now, in the evolution of humans, there were 3 main events, and we call these events the Great Leap Forward. The first event was bipedal locomotion, followed by the development of language, and then the development of art and culture. So bipedal locomotion basically means walking upright on 2 feet. Okay. So the transition to bipedalism occurred when the humans, or the hominids at that time, we weren't Homo sapiens back then, moved out of the forests into the grasslands. So one of the skeletons found of the fossil of Australopithecus afarensis was called Lucy, after the Beatles song Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. It was discovered in 1974 in Ethiopia, and this Lucy was very, very important because the scientists pretty much found an almost intact skeleton which had never been found before. Lucy was estimated to have lived around 3.2 million years ago, and here is the skeleton that they found. So they found ribs, they found limb bones, and using clues from the structure of the skeleton, scientists could infer a lot of things. So some fun facts about Lucy. As I said, her age was around 3.2 to 3.3 million years ago, and she was discovered in Africa in 1974. So this is an artist's reconstruction of Lucy, and this is a reconstruction of her skeleton. So Lucy was around 3 feet 7 inches tall and about 64 pounds in weight, and looked somewhat like a chimpanzee. But why was Lucy so important? Well, although Lucy had a small brain, the pelvis and the leg bones were almost identical in function to those of modern humans, showing with certainty that these hominids had walked erect. So never before had such an intact skeleton been found. So basically, we definitively know that Lucy walked erect. And if you look at her skeleton, you can see here that the pelvic girdle was basically broad and lower on the skeleton. Also, the knees, the knee joints or the patella bones, they were very similar to modern humans. Let's move on to the next great leap. So as I said, the first great leap was the development of bipedal locomotion. The second great leap was the development of language. So we know that the gene responsible for language is called FOXP2. So somewhere way back in evolution, there was a mutation that occurred on the FOXP2 gene that allowed hominids to actually speak. Okay. Also, if you observe and compare the human brain to the brain of chimpanzees and macaws, we see that in human brains, the regions involved in language are very highly evolved in relation to our other relatives. Finally, art and culture. So, along with bipedal locomotion and language, hominids developed art and culture. And you can see from these cave paintings made in the Paleolithic era by Cro-Magnon man show that human hominids basically had a lot of art. They also had a lot of culture and rituals, such as burying their dead. Okay, so if we look at the evolution of hominids, we know that Lucy, Australopithecus afarensis, could walk upright. We can infer that Homo ergaster could probably speak. Okay. We also know that the diet of early hominins or hominids actually changed. So if you look at a chimp's teeth, you can see that they have these sharp teeth for basically tearing apart flesh. But then, if you observe a human jaw, you can see that we kind of lost these sharp teeth because first of all, we started to cook our food, and then we started to eat vegetables and crops and became hunter-gatherers. Tools. So humans began to use tools very early on, even as far back as 3.4 million years ago. And so in the Stone Age, you can see that there are various different kinds of tools, like this stone was probably used as a hammer. This flatter stone was probably used as a scraper. These look like, arrowheads or tools for chiseling or cutting. Okay, so some of the key concepts that we've looked at is that the change to open habitat may have selected for bipedal locomotion. So as the animals on the earth evolve, so does the environment of the earth evolve. So as time went by, in Africa, a lot of the lush green foliage and forests was lost due to lack of rain or drought, and some of the forest transitioned into savanna or the grasslands. In the grasslands, the hominids were exposed and couldn't swing around on trees, so they basically were forced to start walking in these open areas and transition to bipedal locomotion. Hominids also used very primitive, or in certain cases sophisticated, stone tools, and we know that humans did not evolve like a ladder because at least 4 species of hominids could exist on the planet at any one time. So human evolution is more like a tree than a ladder, as we can see here. And guess who survived? Only we survived. All these species died out during evolution. Okay, so let's switch to talking about the Neanderthals. We know that the Neanderthals evolved in Europe and Asia. So this is a skeleton of a Neanderthal, and this is a modern human skeleton. You can see that the Neanderthal has these brow ridges and a pretty big brain. They're more stocky and well built than modern humans. So modern humans and Neanderthals actually branched off into separate monophyletic groups. Here you can see the brain region of the Neanderthal. Since they lived in colder regions, they were very short and stocky and heavier. They had a larger brain, but possibly they had smaller frontal and parietal lobes, suggesting that even though they did have higher order thinking, the higher order thinking was not as developed as Homo sapiens or other hominids. So the Neanderthals were named after fossils discovered in the Neander Valley in Germany in 1856. They are the first hominids to bury their dead. They made clothes from animal skins. They lived in caves and tents. They basically did have a society. So here you can see, an early hut or tent made by the Neanderthals, and these are some of the Neanderthal sites that have been excavated, and fossils have been found there. They could also hunt and made tools. They did have a social life. They had more localized groups and temporary camps and less organized family structure than modern humans. The Neanderthal genome has been sequenced, and here you can see it came out in the journal Cell. And the first of all, it was the mitochondrial genome that was sequenced, and then the nuclear DNA was also sequenced. And the main finding from the sequencing was that Neanderthals actually have a mutation in the FOXP2 gene. So you can see the location of the mutations here, and it is these mutations that allow modern hominids to speak. So the common theory that the layman supports is like, well, Neanderthals are stupid. They couldn't speak and they made grunting sounds. Well, that's not true, because according to DNA, Neanderthals had developed the ability to speak and had language. We can reconstruct phylogenetic trees and look at evolution by looking at gene sequences and basically build trees using genetic sequences and look at relationships between different groups of organisms. Let's switch topics to the hobbits. So we've talked about the Neanderthals. We've talked about Lucy. Now let's talk about the hobbits. Obviously, these are not Tolkien's hobbits, but then who were the hobbits? So recently there have been fossils found, and they've been named the Denisovans. Denisovans were close relatives of the Neanderthals and were also thought to interbreed with humans. They're named Denisovans because the fossil remains were found in a cave in Denisova in the Altai Mountains in Siberia. Okay, so this is, where are we? So this is the Altai Mountains here, and this is Denisova. And this is where the fossil remains were found. They were found in this cave, which overlooks a valley. This is a very strategic position So basically, you know how we buy houses nowadays based on location? Well, back in the day, this would have been prime real estate because, well, if you're in this cave, you're protected and you can also see your enemies coming. And this cave in Denisova is kind of unique because at different periods of time, different remains of modern humans, Neanderthals, and also Denisovans have been found in this cave, suggesting at different periods of time all three species at one time, well, not at the same time, but at different times actually inhabited this cave, which made it pretty much prime real estate back in the day. Here you can see that the Neanderthal range and the Homo range overlapped with the Denisovan range, and it's been found that the Denisovans both interbred with the Neanderthals and the Homo sapiens. Okay, so this is Savante Pabo, who actually was the team leader in the discovery of the hobbits, as we like to call them, or the Denisovans. Obviously, we call them hobbits because they are inferred to be very short. So what did they find? Initially, they found 2 teeth and a toe bone. And when they did mitochondrial DNA sequencing, they found that it was genetically distinct from the mitochondrial DNA of both the Neanderthals and the modern humans. Then they obviously sequenced the nuclear genome and found that this group, the Denisovans, share a common origin with the Neanderthals. So if we look at the phylogenetic tree, so if this is a common ancestor at the root of the tree, then there's Homo ergaster. Then Homo ergaster split off into 2 branches. One branch forms the Denisovans, and the other forms Homo heidelbergensis. Then Homo heidelbergensis then split off into 2 different phyletic groups. One is the Neanderthals, and the other is the modern humans. You can also get an estimation of the time. So the 2 branches here split off around 1 million years ago. The Neanderthals and modern humans separated around 466,000 years ago. So we were talking about the hobbits or the Denisovans, and what we found were in modern human populations, when we compared it to the Denisovan DNA sequence, we found that Denisovan alleles were present in these populations here, okay, suggesting that the Denisovans also interbred with the humans. I don't know if I mentioned this, but the Neanderthals also interbred with humans and left traces of their DNA in human populations. So there is evidence of gene flow of Denisovans and humans, and also gene flow between the Neanderthals and the Denisovans, suggesting that all 3 species could actually interbreed. We also have found that a certain gene, Tibetans have a version of the EPAS1 gene, which helps them adapt to low oxygen levels at high altitude. And according to a study published in Nature in July 2014, the same version of EPAS1 gene is found in the Denisovan population, suggesting that this gene, EPAS1, this version of the gene found in Tibetans, actually originated with the Denisovans. So the key concept here is that from molecular and fossil evidence, we find that the Neanderthals and the Denisovans represent separate lineages, but they descend from a common African ancestor. So Homo sapiens, which is us, emerged around 50,000 to 200,000 years ago, depending on what kind of evidence you look at. So, in the human tree of evolution, all our ancestors were wiped out and only we survived. Only the Homo sapiens survived, but Homo sapiens carry traces of the Neanderthal genome or Neanderthal genes and Denisovan genes in their genome, suggesting that at a certain point the humans or the Homo sapiens did interbreed with both the Neanderthals and the Denisovans. So, of course, we have a hypothesis by which humans originated in Africa. They moved out of Africa and migrated to all the four corners of the globe. So out of Africa, humans moved up north, they moved west, they moved east into Asia, India, and then to Indonesia, Australia, and also, because the world's a globe, uh, through Russia to North America and finally to South America. And this is the out of Africa hypothesis of human expansion. There, of course, along with human evolution, the biological evolution aspect, there is also a cultural evolution aspect that we can look at. There is lots of evidence from cave art, artifacts, and imagery that human beings, as they evolved biologically, also evolved culturally. So early Homo sapiens were very culturally diverse. They had different customs and a semblance of religion. They had creativity and art. There is a current hypothesis that suggests that this social evolution may have driven an increase in brain skills. And if you look at, compare social skills between humans and other apes, we see the humans have far greater social skills, whereas in physical skills, it's pretty much evenly spread out. So, as I mentioned before, this may be because the humans have a highly developed brain, and especially in regions of communication and language. So basically, biological evolution, as it progressed, there was also a cultural evolution. Basically, what we call evolution meets civilization. So as we biologically evolved, we developed all this art, culture, religion, and customs, and family, and the concept of belonging and togetherness, which basically led to us creating a civilization and culture. So, in summary, the human brain evolved in response to a variety of selective pressure, which may be related to social evolution. We obviously know that humans have adapted to environmental change. For instance, while the hominids were in Africa, we were very dark skinned. As we moved out of Africa, we adapted to different regions and temperatures, and now human beings are very diverse, both culturally and also physically. In some regions, human beings are short. In other regions, they're tall. Some are fair-skinned, some are dark-skinned. And this is because of the fact that humans have adapted to environmental change. Another kind of evolution, which is not biological evolution is cultural evolution. It's when human practices are passed from generation to generation, which basically means our traditions that we got from our ancestors. And these, even though they're strictly not biological evolution, they can also be studied through certain evolutionary methods. So, this is where we came from, ladies and gentlemen, and meet our ancestors, right? And meet the human evolutionary tree and be very, very proud because out of all these hominid species, we are the only ones that survived. So thank you very much. And please read the PowerPoint slides and any notes that I post for your final exams.